thank you for joining us again for another week where we talk about what happened in the Arkansas legislature. Today we have Austin Bailey joining us. She is with the Arkansas Times. We love Austin and her work, and we're really happy she's here. Hannah is here, but not on camera because unfortunately she has the COVIDs for the first time. So you can send her all of your good vibes and thoughts and prayers and all of that stuff. So sorry, Hannah. And thank you, Austin, for subbing for us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we were just talking about before we started recording how each one of us was kind of busy doing a lot of other things this week. And so we did not necessarily catch every single moment of every single committee. But we do have a lot of big things to talk about that dominated the legislature this week. I think I want to start with the affirmative action bill. The anti-affirmative action bill would effectively end affirmative action in the state. That's proposed by Senator Dan Sullivan. He ran that last week and we talked about that. But this week he was getting feedback from stakeholders. He wants to get some input before he takes it to the Senate floor. And he did that by addressing the Democratic Black Caucus at the beginning of the week. And things kind of maybe didn't go the way that Senator Sullivan planned. I don't know. Austin, do you have thoughts and feelings about what happened?
I had lots of thoughts and feelings about it while it was happening. It made me want to die a little bit to watch it. Another thought I had was just like the facial expressions of everyone in that meeting were probably like the best of the session. Like you could have watched all of it with the sound off and known exactly what was happening. So I don't know that he really expected a different reception. I don't think he cared. And in fact, it might have been just kind of theater. I think people like the kind of racism that he is selling. And I think that was probably beneficial to his brand. Obviously it's an outlandish proposition altogether, offensive, pretty gross. And I do think that it's going to be amended pretty significantly. The fact that it's not going to just be killed outright is unpleasant. But here we are. And just so everyone's situational awareness, that meeting was not streamed because it was a caucus meeting, but there were members of the press and media in attendance, and someone had taken some clips and put it on Twitter. And there are these like little snippets of what happened where Senator Sullivan is basically saying his bill ends discrimination somehow miraculously. And there was pushback from Black Caucus members, rightfully so. And then this like back and forth. And then Senator Sullivan said like, well, why haven't you tried to end discrimination by filing legislation that does that?
Why hasn't the Black Caucus filed a bill to end discrimination? Well, if you talk about it all the time and you're discussing discrimination, it seems like the Black Caucus would at some point file a bill to end it. I don't want to be rude, and this is your committee meeting, it's your people, and if he has more he'd like to say, go ahead.
Hold on. Go. I mean, in all likelihood, some version of this will probably pass. I think, there have been concerns from like chamber folks about how this might affect training and recruitment. I think there's some like, in addition to just like the moral obvious issues, there's just some economic issues here. So I do think that the outlandish, appalling version of the bill will be toned down a bit. But
Sarah Sanders gave the response to the State of the Union on Tuesday evening, and then on Wednesday unveiled the, I guess, top line elements of her LEARNS Act bill, which we, to be clear, have still not seen. That bill has yet to be filed. I think maybe some were expecting it to be filed yesterday, but really it was just kind of a press conference to say like, we are filing this and here's what it actually is in it. Austin, you were there. What are the highlights?
Well, it was jam-packed. it was probably what, 90% white men in suits. It was not a diverse crowd. It was like very, homogeneous crowd of conservative folks. And it very much had the same vibe as remember when Congress voted to repeal like affordable health care, and they had the Rose Garden party at the White House, and it was just like same vibe. So it was jubilant. Everyone was very excited. That Sanders, as you said, she only kind of gave the high level of what she's offering here. $50,000 minimum teacher salary, fantastic. Added emphasis on third grade literacy with some new literacy coaches to head out and fan across the state. Great. She mentioned something about streamlining access to pre-K. We don't know what that means really, but any added emphasis on pre-K is great. Universal pre-K is clearly what we want. And that's what's shown to really work. So who knows, maybe that'll be in there. Then, so yay, great stuff. It's kind of a Trojan horse though, because stuffed in there is there's it would repeal the Teacher Fair Dismissal Act, and I've heard kind of some mixed things about that, and I think it's really interesting. But my understanding is, that it just basically prevents teachers from being fired without cause. And teachers, kind of traditionally haven't been treated just wonderfully in the state of Arkansas. So that would be taken away. And obviously the main thing is a very comprehensive voucher program that basically within 3 years, every student in the state could take their state allotted funding and go to a private school, go to a church school, or homeschool even. We don't know anything about any accountability that would be attached to that money. My guess is that there might not be any, state funds could be going to these schools where there's no accountability, no transparency. No requirements to test at the end of the year to see if anybody learned anything. These schools, don't provide transportation. They may not provide meals. They may not provide special education services. So, it doesn't sound like that sweet of a deal to me. I think of it basically as like there'll be like 50% off coupons for wealthy families that already go to private schools. It's probably about between $7,000 and $8,000 would be the number. Private schools here in Little Rock all cost a good deal more than that. I did check, and it looks like the school where Governor Sanders sends her kids runs about $10,000 or $11,000 a year per kid, but that doesn't include transportation or food. So great. She'd get a $7,000 voucher coupon off of her tuition, but that still leaves what, $4,000 or $5,000 that maybe not every family has just laying around. So I'm not sold on it. I don't think that many progressive folks are sold on it. I know that Arkansas Advocates for Children and Families has some significant concerns about how this will resegregate Arkansas schools, create worse equity issues than we have already. I think vouchers have not been shown to improve student achievement. So it's disastrous.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts on it. I mean, anybody that follows 4AR People's content know that we have advocated for teacher pay raises, and we are very happy with the $50,000 base salary for incoming teachers, or starting teachers rather. We are not a fan of vouchers. I had a friend give me a call today, Dr. Angie Maxwell. She's brilliant academic here at the University of Arkansas. And she had this great question, which was, hey, the money follows the student, but it's also based on enrollment. And so yes, under this new plan, there would be potentially students leaving public schools and that money following them to private schools. Well, if vouchers are universal and we have 18,000 plus students currently enrolled in private schools, that is new money technically that would have to just somehow appear out of nowhere. That wouldn't be coming from, you know, our public school system. It wouldn't be following a student. Those students have never had those public dollars follow them. And so where would that money come from? How would we pay for that? I think there's so many questions about the funding element. And then of course, the pushback from a lot of people in the public education advocacy space, which is, you know, $50,000 a year base salaries for teachers is great. Teacher raises are absolutely needed. Is this sustainable if money is then going to be siphoned away from public school? How will that impact salaries going forward? So a lot of big questions about how to pay for this. You know, I think it's really interesting to wonder, like, where is this money going to come from to subsidize students that already attend private school for families that we know can pay for it because they already are in attendance. And how will that happen? So taxpayer, like, red flag there. Another thing that I've been thinking a lot about this week is the rhetoric around like paying teachers more, but then the contrast of how the administration for the governor's office and then also some of our lawmakers still use these terms to call, woo, a cat just jumped in my lap, excuse me. That they call our public school teachers indoctrinators and groomers and are, you know, like, war against the public school teachers, the woke mob and all of this stuff. And, you know, I just don't know how you can say that and then also say, but they're great, so let's give them a raise. Like, you know, from my understanding, teachers can see past that and don't enjoy being used as political pawns. And that's really unfortunate. So I'm really interested to get my hands on this bill. I've got my printer out and I'm ready to print all 100 plus pages of it. And once we get that, we'll see what it actually said.
Well, you know, one thing that really struck me at the Capitol during the announcement was when Governor Sanders said, you know, we have to reform our schools. Now is the time, or else we're going to keep having generational poverty. And it was a little bit of like a, you know, aha moment for me, because her premise here that the reason that Arkansas is a poor state is because our schools have failed us is in fact, you know, reversed. You know, it's her role and it's legislators' role and it's the government's role to make sure that Arkansans are not living in poverty, that we have these opportunities. And the fact of the matter is that it's the government and the economy's failure, and trying to foist that blame onto our public schools, which are really like the best tool that we have, in fact, to reverse generational poverty, is really something very much in her toolbox. I think that you know, Governor Sanders is really good at blaming people for something that really is her responsibility. So I just am not going to go along with that talking point. You know, Arkansas's public schools did not create the poverty that is endemic in our state. And in fact, I would argue that Arkansas public schools have overperformed in helping to deliver students out of that, despite being under-resourced and disrespected. So I think that it's really important to reject that premise entirely.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, you know, along those lines, I had a conversation today with Representative Jim Wooten. He's a Republican legislator from BB, and has this great history of public service, was a assistant coach to the BB football team, and then was later on a state trooper, and now he's a state legislator. So has had these like state jobs forever. And, you know, that was something he talked a lot about in our conversation, was the access to to school choice, like what does that mean for smaller school districts? He's worried about small schools in Eudora and Forest City, and what this means for them going forward. I mean, we've talked some about this like Friday Night Lights concept of like that our schools in our small towns, like that's like the center of culture and community, and those sports teams are the center of that, and people love it and need it, and it allows communities to thrive, and it allows kids to grow and have those opportunities. And so one thing that we're watching is next week, he has 2 bills that will run in the House in education, and we've mentioned them before, but one of them would require private schools that accept vouchers and accept public funds to provide those yearly student assessment tests, so that we can actually start seeing data on, is the education the same? What are the standards? How is this affecting students that use public funds? We can have that data start to come in and compare those. It would also require private schools to accept any student that applies with a voucher. That's a big deal. I mean, part of this conversation is, what does this do to families with kids with disabilities, or private schools that have probably very limited and restricted admission standards and can just reject anyone because it's their prerogative. So requiring that if someone is applying with vouchers would be a big game changer as far as like actual, empowerment for parents and families. And then he has another bill that would require private schools to provide transportation for students within 35 miles of a campus. Again, access there. And he talked in our conversation about like, that's just one element. Like that's not providing free lunches for students who may be able to attend those private schools if they get the transportation. And so, yeah, it's nice to hear legislators on both sides of the aisle be concerned about some of these issues. It's nice to see some bipartisanship and support of public schools and against vouchers.
For sure.
Yeah.
I wonder too, we talked about this $50,000 minimum teacher salary. Well, obviously, private schools don't have to follow that. That would be it. That's another thing that doesn't matter to them. So, it's surely this is, this could be, I don't know that I have a question about if charter schools would have to offer that 50,000. I don't know. But, there's a concern that, this could be a moneymaker for somebody who wants to start up a private school, pocket that money by, I'm thinking kind of virtual academies, kind of running school through your computer, providing bare minimum services, no transportation, no food. It could be, I could certainly see it being a moneymaker for people, but students would lose out big time. And I hate to see that happen.
Yeah. So to be determined on the meat of the bill. We have yet to see that. We expect it to maybe come next week. And then we'll have a good look at it and talk about it then. Let's see what else happened. A couple other things. I do know that there was that work requirement for public housing that passed off the House floor and now heads to the Senate. If I'm up to date on it, I don't think it's been in the Senate yet. Another kind of wonky, weird thing is Representative Pilkington had a bill that he proposed like way back in the summer after the overturning of Roe that would require private businesses in the state of Arkansas that are, helping their employees access reproductive health care out of state. If they're providing that, they would also need to be required to provide paid maternity leave. And it was kind of framed as this like, see, we're helping women, but really it's like, we're going to punish businesses for being woke, which is a big theme of our legislature. That passed House Public Health today. Any comments on that, Austin?
I mean, I think it's really weird to like weaponize choice as, to punish companies. It's virtue signaling really. And, this is his cause. So it's gross. I'm surprised that maybe the chamber will push back on this. It's, I think it's, how that Florida took the fight to Disney. I mean, I guess, are we doing that now? I don't know.
Yeah, we gotta go after woke mart.
Yeah, I
right?
guess so.
We gotta go after those woke financial institutions that are too woke, and we're gonna punish. Yeah, I just don't. This is like the one thing that boggles my mind, is this legislation that often comes in from out of state that is very anti-business and very like, we're going to start regulating business, when it's my understanding, I think probably a lot of people's understanding, that conservatism is typically pro-business and typically free market. And this is wild government overreach into the business of private business. And I'm pretty sure businesses don't like that. I mean, I don't own a large corporation or a top 50 Fortune company, but I get the feeling that that's probably, there's not a big appetite for policy like this. And it's,
I don't think they like the legislature telling them what to do and how to do it. I mean, who does, right? Yeah, I thought Republicans that wasn't their brand, but it secretly maybe is sometimes.
Yeah. So, Hannah's off camera because she's sick right now, but she says that, I guess in committee, Representative Pilkington said he reached out to businesses that do offer help to employees who are seeking reproductive health care out of state, and that they, quote, didn't oppose it, his bill. So I don't know what that means. Maybe we'll hear.
I think that maybe what it means is that businesses who support women and are supportive of their female employees support them, whether they need reproductive choice here or whether they need maternity leave here, which is fantastic.
It is. So good on those businesses. I mean, hey, if you're going to step in and help Arkansans out when the state is really putting a lot of restrictions on us personally, thank you.
And then another thing about the bill that you talked about for work requirements for public housing, while sometimes our legislature passes things, that doesn't always mean that they're actually legal and enforceable. And I think that this is going to be the case. Our legislature also has this thing where they don't like to admit that federal law supersedes state law sometimes, but it does. And public housing is largely a federal program. And there are policies that I think will pretty clearly override what we're trying to do here, but it sure looks good to punch down on poor people. So we'll do that.
It does. And there's like another theme kind of floating through the legislature right now, that's attached to a lot of these types of bills, whether they are removing barriers or to government services or adding red tape to government services. But this one kind of group of lawmakers that talk about like work being really important to human dignity and to helping us like grow and flourish as individuals. I just wanted to flag that because we'll probably hear that over and over again during this session, and it's not always consistent when it is used. It's not applied broadly, because it doesn't apply to everyone. So just something to flag for folks if they hear those talking points. They're typically that means there's an agenda behind it. Last day to file constitutional amendments was yesterday, so we saw a flood of those. We have not had time to go through all of them. I'm probably sure there's some really wonky ones in there. And just a reminder that the legislature can refer to, is that right? To the ballot every cycle, but they have to vote them out just like they do with other bills. So that's why you saw a big influx yesterday if you're following that. But it doesn't mean that those bills are actually going to end up on the ballot. They've got to get approved. And there's typically clear winners that have a lot of support, and then other ones that are just kind of like one-offs that people are throwing out into the wind. So yeah.
There's one that I like, and it's to legalize recreational marijuana across the state, which I think is an economic need, since I think people are just going to simply start leaving the state. But I don't think that's the one that's going to make it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see which. I think we typically watch to see which start accumulating co-sponsors, and that's a good indicator of like it having some popularity. But right now, when it's just the last day, it's just a free for all, and there's really no way to tell unless someone is kind and whispers to us what may be the popular one. So I think that's it. Are we missing anything important?
I think that's it. It's Thursday. They went home, and I think that we covered the high points.
We covered the high points. If we miss something or screw something up, we apologize. A note that if we do have corrections, we will drop them in the comments on or in the description on the YouTube video. We will update with corrections if we have any on our blog posts. If we send them out an email and you respond that there's a correction, I apologize in advance. We cannot take back the email. It is just out there forever. But thank you for joining us. And thank you, Austin, for subbing in today and giving us your feedback.
It was fun. Thank you.
Okay. Until next week.